Welcome to Scythe Reviews. My name is Scythe, and today we are talking about Oddity. I was going to make my first review about Fly Me to the Moon, the new movie with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum about NASA, but then I saw Oddity. Oddity is a new horror film that is just released very limitedly. It is directed by Damien McCarthy and distributed by IFC Films in corporations with Shudder. Knowing that it has something to do with Shudder, you know it's probably either gonna be really good or really weird, or both. Now, I've kind of been on a kick recently where I've just been seeing everything that's coming out, whether it's like, an action movie or it's a kid's movie. If it comes out into a theater, I've seen it. So whenever Oddity came out, I was like, you know what, I should probably try to just go and see this. I'm not necessarily a fan of going to see horror movies in theaters. I get very scared at the loud noises. And let's face it, a lot of horror movies nowadays think that, scares can only happen with loud noises. Which honestly kind of sucks, but what can you do? So going into it, I was a little bit iffy on whether it was going to be good or not. I said to myself whenever I sat down, I was like, listen, you were the only one in this theater. You saw A Quiet Place, and A Quiet Place was good, so let's give this a shot. And goddamn, this is my second favorite horror movie now. Now, I will be going into the plot of this movie, so if you want to see it for yourself, try to grab a ticket as quickly as you can before it gets knocked out of theaters. I definitely recommend you see this movie first. As a quick spoiler-free thing, I'm gonna go ahead and just give you the basic description of what this movie is, so if it does sound interesting to you, then you can go see it. Through this movie, we follow Darcy, a twin sister of Danny, who was very brutally murdered in a new house that they were trying to build. Now, Darcy owns an antique shop, which is usually filled with haunted items, which she uses to try to solve her sister's murder. If it sounds really cool to you, please, I beg you, go see this movie. Now we are gonna get into spoiler territory. I am going to explain the complete plot of this movie. If you have not seen it, please stop this video, come back to it later, or don't. I don't care as long as you go watch the movie. That being said, let's get into it. The movie begins with Danny. She is standing in the house that she is actively trying to fix up. You actually see her trying to build a trap door. When Danny finally finds service in the house, she sits down to call her husband Ted, who is actually a high-up doctor at the mental facility down the road. They have a nice little conversation, talk about Danny's sister, and they allude to Darcy having some sort of issue, and that she needs to find a doctor. Unfortunately, they can't really get Darcy to go to the doctor, so they're trying to form a little dinner date idea just to bring up the subject. Throughout this time in the movie, we get nice still shots of Danny going around to different parts of the house, and we notice that she has a camera set up to an automatic flash. Usually, whenever people do this, it's probably because they're trying to catch a ghost. Nightfall comes around, and Danny eventually cannot find her phone. She looks in her car, but she hears scary sounds, so she runs back inside the house and locks the door. Eventually, she hears a knock at the door, so she opens the little C-latch so she can see who's outside, and it's one of the mental health patients. This man's name is Olin, and he is there to try to warn Danny that somebody has gone into her house. He watched somebody walk in there, and she is obviously, respectfully, very skeptical about what he's saying. He keeps saying that she needs to let him in so that he can look around, but she doesn't want to let him in, so he says, you know what, if you find your phone, call the police, I'm serious about this. So she starts walking to the door, grabs her hand on the key, and that's whenever the screen cuts to black. After this, we see Ted go visit Darcy in her antique shop. Darcy is messing around with this old antique bell, which she claims is haunted. Of course, Ted, being the doctor in a place full of crazy people, doesn't believe her and thinks she's crazy. As she goes on to talk about this bell, she mentions that there was a bellhop who eventually got killed in the hotel, and anybody who rang that bell eventually ended up dying because the bellhop would come running to kill them. Any smart person would definitely look at that bell and be like, huh, that's probably going to come back later. Eventually, they allude to the fact that Danny did die in that house, unfortunately, but we still don't know who did it. Ted also mentions that he actually has a new girlfriend, somebody who he definitely totally wasn't sleeping with at the same time he was married to Danny because she works with him. He does a terrible job at hiding that. Of course, Darcy is not a fan of the new girlfriend, but she says, you know what, whatever, it's your life, and goes on to find random things around her house. What the fuck just fell? Don't make me think my house is starting to be haunted now. While Darcy is not a fan of this, she just continues her small conversation with Ted. They're both glad to see that each other are okay, and Darcy runs around her house trying to find some sort of ritual item. She comes across this chest, which we only get a peek of somewhat of what's inside the box, which are a pair of hands that are made out of wood. Eventually, we cut back to Yana, the new girlfriend, and Ted in the brand new, better looking house. It is filled with furniture, it's not completely empty with a tent like we saw when Danny was working on it at the beginning of the movie. Yana is complaining that she keeps hearing weird things and that she actually caught a picture of Danny in the house after she died. Obviously, Ted doesn't believe her. He thinks that she's just seeing things, that the fact that she's staying in the house alone is about getting to her, and she should probably go back to the apartment she has in the city. So Yana considers this. She gets ready to go, and whenever they go outside, they realize that Darcy is standing right outside their house. Now, a few key things to note. Darcy is blind. Darcy claims that her blindness actually helps her be a medium or a psychic and helps her see things, which is in fact why she's there in the first place. Previously, she had asked Ted to bring her this little piece of an eye. Viewers may recognize this eye as Olin's eye. She uses this eye to be able to tell what actually happened in certain events rather than what everybody else says happened. Anyway, that eye is just not the only reason that she's there. She actually brought them a gift. The wooden chest that she was looking at earlier in the movie, she brought to them, and inside is this life-size wooden man. This thing is terrifying. It is screaming even though it doesn't make any noise, but in fact, it does move throughout the movie. And even though, I know in the trailer, they made a lot of the focus on this wooden man, he doesn't do a lot in this movie. But what is the creepiest is that for the still shots throughout the movie, he's just in the background, just sitting completely still, and it's not okay. It is totally my cell phone's fault for not having enough storage on it, and not me who put a bunch of photos on there. Going back to what I was saying, Darcy is at the house now. Yana can't find her keys, so Yana is stuck there with her. Of course, Yana doesn't like this because Yana finds Darcy weird and creepy, and she doesn't want to be in that house alone already. Eventually, they get to talking over some food, and Darcy is pressing Yana about having an affair. Yana denies this, of course, with all intent of knowing that she is wrong. Eventually, Darcy passes it all off, and she just gives up on the whole entire questioning, asking about Danny, asking about weird things happening in the house. Then eventually, she falls asleep on the couch. Yana takes time to investigate this wooden man, sees that there's these little dots in the back of his head, so she takes a pair of tweezers and starts taking things out of the doll's head. She notices that there's a picture of Danny and Darcy whenever they were little twins. She notices pieces of hair, very ritualistic items. As she's taking all of these out, Darcy wakes up and yells at her to put them all back inside the doll. Yana politely agrees, hurries up and puts everything back in there, goes upstairs, and she wants to go to bed too. This scene I have a problem with. This movie was doing so good, why did it have to get cheesy? This is the scene where Yana gets chased out of the house by Danny. I get that they're trying to be scary, but Danny would have been so much better as a non-scary ghost. They put the traditional, weird, disgruntled-looking makeup over her. They make her appear in the flashes of the camera where she screams, "Run!" Literally, just like that. Eventually, Yana finds her keys inside the bottom of the wooden chest, and she runs out of the house, calls Ted, and tells him how fucking crazy everything is, and she wants nothing to do with him. The scene could have been so much better. It would have been so much better if we didn't see, the floating head of Danny in the blackened doorway. It was just a bit too cheesy for me, but moving on. Eventually, more weird things start happening. Ted comes home quickly to find Darcy upstairs, hunched over. And this is whenever Darcy drops a bomb. Now, earlier in the movie, whenever Darcy was having the conversation with Yana, she explains that Olin, in fact, did not kill Danny. It was actually Ivan. Who is Ivan? Ivan is the help at the mental office where Ted works at. He's basically Ted's right-hand man when it comes to dealing with the patients. We've seen bits and pieces of how rough Ivan is and how, like, angry he is and very disrespectful towards the patients. But to this point, we have never seen any connection between him and Danny, which is exactly what Yana says. At this point where we are now in the movie, Darcy has finally realized that it wasn't just Ivan that came in to kill her, Ted was the one that ordered it. I do have another gripe about this. The ending is just like a little bit too easy to guess. I mean, in reality, whenever you look at like a wife being killed, you always look at the husband first. But it is what it is. She finally lets it all out and she's like, I know what exactly you did. And Ted denies it. Instead, what he tries to do is tell Darcy that she is crazy and that if she has all of this evidence, that she can just have the detective call her and everything will be let out and whatever. So Ted backs up a little bit and he sets his phone on the chair and says, I'm going to have the detective call you. When the phone rings, pick it up. All of a sudden, Ted is rushing back to the mental facility. What's he doing? He's calling his own cell phone. Why is he calling his own cell phone? Because he removed the trap door that Danny was building at the beginning of the movie, which I guarantee he probably asked her to build for this specific reason. And now he's just waiting for Darcy to go pick up the phone so that she could walk in front of her and fall through the trapdoor, which unfortunately is exactly what happens. Now, because he wants no connection to this, he sends Ivan to the house just to make sure that, Darcy is actually dead, which whenever he gets there, she's not. She's still breathing. Ivan is about to go finish off the job whenever Darcy finally does this whole we are connected thing, ritualistic shit with the doll, and the doll comes to life. I appreciate what they did regarding the actor inside the wooden suit. Wooden, I know it's probably not actually wood whenever he's wearing it. A lot of movies, what they'll do with a live action item is they'll probably like make it stand at the end of a hallway and then just like run towards the camera for a quick scare. But this thing moves as slow as possible to just create the most like creepy effect ever. This thing chases Ivan around the house. Eventually he jumps off the balcony to the bottom floor and breaks his leg. And after that, Ivan is strapped to a hospital bed in the mental facility. Darcy does unfortunately die, because I'm sorry, there's no way to survive a fall onto concrete. Cutting back to Ivan in the hospital bed, Ted walks in and basically says, hey, you know what? You're a loose string and I can't have you, so I'm just gonna have you killed. But not in any, fun way. I'm gonna make this cannibalistic patient that we've been alluding to the entire time in the movie come eat your dogs. And that's what happened. Ivan dies. Which, to be honest, good. The end of the movie is finally here. Ted is all alone in his house. Yana is nowhere to be seen because she wants nothing to do with Ted and any of this bullshit that she has gone through. Which, understandable, I hate your character, but you know what? Good for you on being smart. Ted goes down to his little dining room. He pulls out a box that has the hotel bell in it. It takes him a little bit of time, but he finally rings the bell and he scoffs because nothing happens. And then we cut to a shot of a bellman standing next to him just very calmly. We fade off with some nice music, and that's the end of Oddity. Let's do the bad first. Do I think that this is the best horror movie that I've ever seen? No. While being a very good one, I did take points off of my rating just for two specific things. One thing being that scene with Yana where she's being chased out of the house. I don't understand why they made Danny some evil spirit whenever she was just a normal girl in her house. Like, yeah, she was brutally murdered, but it doesn't make her evil. I feel like they should have done a thing where, Danny can pop up as a spirit in the house for scares, but it shouldn't be in a, she's specifically trying to scare whoever is there. Just have, Danny just standing somewhere normally. They did, in fact, do this earlier in the movie for just a split second. Yana did see Danny. She was standing in the hallway staring out of the window. There was nothing scary about it. She was just there. So Danny being an evil ghost is not good for me. I thought that was stupid. Secondly, the ending. It was very easy to guess that Ivan couldn't have just done this out of spite because you never see him talk to Danny at all in this movie. He has no connection to her, so it was very obvious that he was probably told by Ted to kill his wife. And they talk about this. Ivan says, "Why didn't you just divorce her?" And Ted has this bullshit reason of, "Oh, well, she'll still be in love with me. That's why." Ted thinks that if he just divorces Danny instead of murdering her, that she'll be obsessed with him and won't ever leave him alone. That is bullshit. You could have written something just a little better. Those are my two gripes. A lot of people do have a little bit of issue with like the actual ending scene with the bellhop because a lot of people think that it's just kind of random. In my opinion, I thought it was cute. The ending actually made me smile because we all knew what was going to happen. And I like that they didn't like make it a kill scene. They kind of just like had the dude standing there and I smiled. I was like, hell yes. Now I'm going to talk about some of my favorite things about this movie. Carolyn Bracken plays both Danny and Darcy in this movie, and she is by far the best actress in it. She does an amazing job playing both characters. That's not to say that everybody else did a terrible job. I think that they all did a decent job, but Carolyn just stood out above all of them. I also love the camera work in this movie. This movie relies a lot on still frame shots. Fixed camera angles, basically. While they do have some shaky cam, like following the character, it's not used a lot, and a lot of the frames are just like, imagine a security camera in the corner of a room overlooking everything. A lot of it is still shots, and I love that. That made it so much scarier. Overall, the suspense and the scares in this movie were actually pretty good. This movie did a lot of making you feel more unsettled than trying to just scare you outright. And when the scares did come, they weren't anything like super loud and super in your face. It was very simple things. I also love that most of the characters weren't stupid. Yenna knew that she wanted to get the fuck out of there. She had been trying to get the fuck out of there for many times. And while she tried to put aside her feelings of fear for her new boyfriend, she still deep down knew that she did not want to be there. She didn't want to be around any of this. And in the end, she eventually just said, "Fuck this, I'm out." Which is what a lot of people should do in horror movies. I also like that we do get a little bit of backstory about Olin. We learn that he's not really meant to be in the psych ward. He's actually only there because he was defending himself against his very abusive mother who tried to get his eye out. She had already succeeded with one, that's why he has the fake eye in the beginning of the movie, but they saw that a grown man beat a woman to death, so they put him in the psych ward. I thought it was nice that they actually had somebody who tried to help Danny, and even though they cut away at the beginning of the movie, they did make it clear that Danny did not open the door for Olin. Danny wasn't stupid. Unfortunately, that did lead to her death. Speaking of Danny's death scene, I liked the way that they did it. I think it's kind of stupid that Danny tried to hide in a tent with a light. But instead of seeing and watching this play out, this brutal murder play out, what they did is instead they showed the swinging of the hammer and immediately cut to just a bloody tent and Ivan sitting outside of it. I love that. I thought that that was great. You don't always need to see some like brutal murder happening. It can just be something as simple as that. Just the feeling of like knowing that she went through this anguish without seeing it. Overall, this has been one of the best horror movie experiences that I've had in a theater in a long time. While this movie isn't perfect, no movie is. It is very well done, and the entire team behind it deserves just the longest round of applause for this. Please grab tickets to Oddity while you still can. It's mostly playing in AMC theaters, so if you have one around you, get to it. My rating of Oddity is going to be an 8.5 out of 10. Let me know what movie you want me to cover next. I also have another channel where I do theme park related activities, so if you want, go over to Scythe Universal to check that out. Subscribe and follow for more movie and video game reviews. Thanks for watching!